Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to tackle my first ever LPS costume, and for that I picked up a decently big batch of used LPS and I'm going to do a body swap. So I'm picking the head of the cat and the body of the bear and I'm going to combine both of them. For that I need to heat up the vinyl. It's basically like any doll customization where the head is a vinyl, so you can heat it up a little bit to stretch it. You can totally dunk it in hot water. I just find it more convenient to just heat the spots that I need around the neck with my heat gun. Now, the bear was fairly easy. The cat I struggled with a lot because it had a really chunky neck pack. The reason there's water here is because I soaked them in a vinegar solution before, because first of all they smelled really heavily like fabric softener and I don't really like that smell too much. And second of all because like some of the figures were leaking rust from the neck packs. So I wanted to like get that rust off a little bit more in soaking them, and I'm making sure to dry them and going around the spring a little bit with my wire brush to like really brush like remnants of it off so it wouldn't continue too much. I'm not too sure, but I think it will like still rust in the future, but hopefully this should like prevent the spring from falling apart too soon. But after I did that, it was time to shape the legs. The bear had like forward facing paw pads and I wanted to make them facing downwards because they were a bit too chunky for what I need. So I just used my clippers and the X-Acto blade to like really shorten them and kind of make them like even stumps on which I can then sculpt on. And then it was time for my sculpting media of choice, epoxy sculpt. So this is an epoxy-based two-component sculpting medium, and the nice thing about it is it cures after you mix it. Like you have some work time and then it cures like this. You don't have to bake it, which is always a bonus because vinyl, as mentioned, does get soft with heat. So putting it in the oven would like totally misshape it and not really work well. Depending on the clay, but most of the clay I have would also not stick well onto the base of the body. And epoxy does. You usually, when it's fresh, don't need to glue it. So that's why I chose this. And I just mixed up a little bit for like all of the details. And at this point, I still thought, hey, I can hopefully add all the details in one go. Yeah, wishful thinking. Making the snout part took the better part of like almost 2 hours, and at this point the clay was so like reactive already that it toughened up quite a bit and I had a really hard time to make it stick to anything. So basically I had to do this in 2 steps, but I'm starting out with the nose here, just using some water and a silicone shaper, blending things in, trying to get the shape right. I did have to make it smaller a little bit. When I like tried to add the details the first time, it looked way too much like a capybara. Nothing against them, I think they look cute, but totally not what I was going for here. So, you know, shaving that down a bit, blending everything back in, and then I'm going to add the nose part, which is just a V shape, and then I'm going to detail the mouth. And it may already be recognizable, but what I'm going for here is a fox. I just love how many details LPS have to make them recognizable and cutesy, but like they're not like really realistic, which is also a nice like change of certain figures. So I wanted to make a fox that like fits this style for my little collection. And you know, I tried to like have a certain amount of details like around the mouth and like some of the like facial features that hopefully then also fit well and like combine the body together with the head a bit better, because at the moment they still look not quite as if they belong together. So I started off with the V shape of the nose, made the mouth area, and then used just the needle tool to poke the nostrils. Blended everything in a little bit more, again just using water, and then I tried to use the rest of the pre-mixed stuff to make the tail, just making a wormy delay. It was already really tough to work with, but I think I managed pretty well. Like, blending was super hard. I had to go back and forth like a lot of times to even get it somewhere, and it didn't want to stick at first. But once I got it to sit right, I could add like a little bit of detail like on the tip of the tail. I wanted to blend it into the body, as I mentioned, and the face, and everything has like these cutesy little tufts of like fur, like, you know, around the neck, and on like the head there's the hair swill, and like the paws, the front paws have this nice like furry detail. So I wanted to add that to the tail too, to make it look like it belonged. And then it was just a lot of back and forth blending once again. And then once everything was set, I also added some of the leftover clay for the neck pack to build it up, because, you know, the neck packs were different, so I needed to make it a bit more chunky to fill out the cat head and actually sit properly. So I tried to take inspiration from like the previous neck pack and try to get the shape roughly similar, and hopefully this is gonna work. The paws were basically the same as the snout, just a lot of blending it in first and then adding the details, trying to make them fairly even. The sculpt is a tiny bit uneven from like how the necks spread outwards, so trying to get the paws even took a little bit more back and forth than I thought about, but in the end it worked out pretty well, and I think I shaved off the right amount of material to like still have it blend in nicely, but to like really cover up the old paws. And, you know, after just making the little stumpy feet, I'm just adding like the tiny grooves to separate out its little toes, and that's basically everything I needed to do for the paws. So again, lots of blending with water. I'm actually using like just my fingers for blending and a little brush. It's really nice that you can actually blend this clay with water, because like usually, I mean, with other clay you can use alcohol, but like usually when you have like a 2-component putty, not all of them you can smooth out like this. But epoxy sculpt really works well with that, so it adds a little bit of an ease while working with it, although it definitely behaves differently to other clays. It's like a bit more sticky and a bit more tough to work with. So like I wouldn't really compare it to working with Sculpey or anything. It definitely has different properties. And I would say personally for me it is a bit more challenging to work with. But once it hardens, you know, it's like really, if you manage to blend it into the figure, it really holds well, and that is super nice. You know, without any glue, without anything else you have to do. So I think for any kind of customization like this, it's just perfect. Now, foxes do have like this more pronounced eyebrow, so I wanted to add that without changing the eye shape too much, because I actually really like the eye shape. So I add some like little snakes of clay and just blend them in and add a little bit of like texture. And then I let everything harden. Now the neck pack, from the size, it kind of fit, but there was still a groove missing on the bottom that I kind of needed to cut away a little bit, where like the vinyl comes outwards so that the head sits nicely and doesn't like slip too much downwards on the neck pack. And after that I was able to join the both together like perfectly for the first time, and it actually held up super well. The head is not really slipping down, and the neck pack I created fills out the gaps perfectly. And then it was time for prepping for painting, starting off with removing the shiny paint, because I want to make sure that the next coat of paint I'm adding actually stick. I didn't try to be like fully exact here. I just wanted to make sure that the areas that stick out most don't have too much of this paint, just to make sure that my layers of paint stick. And then I used a mix of white paint and decoupage basically Mod Podge, to do the first layer. The reason why I'm adding a little bit of white base coat is like, first of all, it will just help a little bit to cover the like original colors a bit more, since we have this vibrant red for the head and like the purple for the body, but also it makes it easier for me to see where I'm painting, because inherently Mod Podge is actually clear, so you know, to like make sure I covered everything perfectly and to have the paint stick nicely, I just really wanted to mix this in. Now for the first layer of orange that I'm adding, I actually mixed in a little bit more of the decoupage mix, just to have it stick nicely, and then I added like 2 or 3 more thin layers of this paint to make sure that the orange is really covering nicely. And the paints I'm using here are Vallejo Model and Game Colors. I really love these model paints. I love the color choices and I love how the paint lays down, and I think it was perfect for this kind of application. Some places I needed like 2 coats, but in most cases that was mainly just because I watered it down a decent bit to make sure that the coats weren't like really showing too many paint lines. Now these paints are meant for that, so the pigments are quite strong, so it doesn't dilute it too much, and I didn't need to apply too many coats. It was just more so also a back and forth of like making sure that like all the outlines are clear. So I'm starting off with the cream tone, adding a little bit of the neck fur detail, filling out the inner side of the ears, and then adding like the cute little snout detail. I honestly love this almost beardy like look that foxes have. I think it's absolutely adorable. This like white part around the snout. And I said I wanted to kind of make it look like an LPS, but I wanted to make it a little bit more me. And I personally like a little bit of like hinted at fur texture. So I'm adding some like tiny lines of paint to suggest that all around like certain painting areas. Of course the belly also has a cream tone, so I'm adding that, even though you will not be able to see most of it, but I just feel like I really wanted to add like color everywhere. And then it was time for the black around the ears. And this also got this kind of just simple fur texture. I'm using a fine brush here, and again watering down the paint a little bit more to make sure I can get all the details. And I'm just repeating that for both ears, just adding some of the black and just like adding the fur texture. And this is one of the reasons why I chose the cat head, because the ears are really nice and chunky and I thought they would fit perfectly for a fox, and they have this cutesy little like fur bit sticking out underneath them. So, you know, this was just basically meant for this. It was perfect. And I just thought the like hair tuft is just too adorable. I could have removed it, yes, but I really wanted to keep it. Next up, same thing with the nose, just adding some black here to like make sure that I shape it right. I'm going very slowly, like this is very sped up, just so I can get sharp lines, and in some places it was a bit harder, or I made the lines a bit too thick or too thin when I added another color. So I'm just going a little bit back and forth, but since I'm mainly using like the pure colors out of the tube, I didn't have any problems with like having to remix something, which was really nice. But you know, that goes to show how nice and perfectly vibrant the color choices were. I didn't need to mix anything to get this nice, vibrant, foxy orange. And then the ears also for the inside got a little bit of this cutesy fur texture, this time going sideways and with some black. I think it really adds more and more detail. Like while I was working on it, the more and more I added certain parts, even if they were small, like the ear details, the more and more it started looking like a fox, and it made me so happy that it was coming together so well. The paws get the same treatment, just the front of the paws get like this black with a little bit of fur texture on all the sides. And as I said, I didn't change the front paws, and I'm really happy I didn't. I really like this like a bit more bushy, soft looking fur there. I didn't want to add like the same texture to the back paws because I still wanted to have like the toe details. I was debating on adding toe beans, but decided against it in the end, just because I felt like it wouldn't sit nice and flat anymore. I could have painted them on, but at this point, like with it being underneath, I felt like it wouldn't really matter or match as well. So I just kept everything black. And then for the tail, same thing, a little bit of fur texture on where the colors meet, and then just a nice leather brown to like add the details. And I'm also going to add like the creamy white tip of the tail. Same thing, fur texture to blend the colors in. And I tried really hard to not have to fix up too many spots, so I tried really hard to keep like crisp lines. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't quite, sometimes I had to go back a little bit. And not showing you guys all the tiny fix up I had to do. The worst honestly was the neck part for me, where I kind of got like the like cream kind of off-white onto like all the orange around it where it wasn't meant to be. But it was an easy fix, and it wasn't too bad. Like it was just small lines that like needed a little bit more of the orange to blend it back in. And then it was finally time for the part I was most nervous about, the eyes. Luckily we have a nice molding in them, so I had it easier to get the shapes evenly. Starting off with the black outline, because foxes have quite a nice black eye outline, which I always thought looked really cute. And then I'm adding a little bit of white. I'm not covering the full eye because I didn't want to layer too much paint, and I knew that the like colors of the ears and stuff would like fully cover a decent bit of it if I did. So I just added it on the sides, trying to like not take away too much from the black line. Then I added like a lighter brown and a like decently muted orange as like a highlight color, one after the other in like these small little lines. And then to finish it off, I'm adding the black part. This was like very slow work and very watered down paint. I did have to go back and like fix the outline of the black a teeny tiny bit in some spots, but I actually am really proud how evenly I managed to like keep it, because this was actually one of the parts I had to fix least. And it was time for white eye shines, just using like a ball stylus to add them. And here you can see me apply some gloss nail polish to the eyes. Now, normally you cannot directly do that on top of any acrylic, so please don't do this right after you finish the figure. What I didn't show was I sprayed several coats of matte varnish onto this. And the matte varnish, as long as you don't like work it too much with the nail shine or gloss varnish in this case, shouldn't actually remove that easily, so it should protect the eyes very well. And then you can add the gloss. I didn't want to add resin or anything, but I wanted a really nice glossy sheen, so nail polish was the perfect add. Again, you really need to make sure you have a nice and even thick base coat of varnish on there. I chose matte spray varnish because it has a nice look and it just evens out everything, and you know, just nice and easy to apply. And here you have the final result. I think this turned out amazingly. Like, I'm so happy with how the details I sculpted blend in. You can definitely tell there's a little bit more wrinkling in it, and that's just because like smoothing it out wasn't the easiest. But it definitely blends in nicely. The shape fits perfectly to the face, like the snout I'm really proud of. The hours I put of work in there really worked out, and the paint job was actually so much fun. I really loved this whole process. This was so much fun, honestly. I'm really looking forward to doing some more of these LPS costumes. But yeah, overall, so happy and definitely very recognizable as a fox. I'm really glad I can add this onto my shelf. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this customization, and if you have any kind of tips and tricks, if you've ever customized an LPS before, like any tips and tricks you can give me, please tell me. And if you would have a custom LPS, which creature would it be? Would it be like a fantasy creature? Would it be an animal? Would it be something that already exists that you just don't quite like the pre-made shape of that you want to change? And of course, as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!